We usually picture men when we think of death row. Out of thousands of executions in U.S. history, women make up only a tiny fraction. But in Oklahoma, a handful of women committed crimes so horrific, the state decided gender was no excuse for mercy. Today, we're looking at the unforgivable crimes, the bizarre last meals, and the chilling final words of the women who met their end in Oklahoma's lethal injection chamber. 3 women, 3 gurneys, 3 separate nights inside the same death chamber in McAlester, Oklahoma, a room built to hold men, because for 98 years, it never had to hold anyone else. Between January and December of 2001, the state of Oklahoma executed more people than any other state in the country, and for the first time since statehood, 3 of them were women. This is the story of how they got there, chronologically, case by case. Beginning with a woman named Wanda Jean Allen. Case 1. Wanda Jean Allen. Wanda Jean Allen was born on August 17, 1959, the second of 8 children, into a family scraping by on public assistance in Oklahoma City. Her mother struggled with alcoholism. Her father left not long after Wanda's youngest sibling was born. By the time she was 12, Wanda Jean had already been struck by a truck and knocked unconscious. 2 years later, she was stabbed in the temple. The damage from those 2 injuries would follow her for the rest of her life. Doctors who examined her afterward found dysfunction in the left hemisphere of her brain, the part responsible for reasoning, for weighing cause and effect, for controlling impulses under stress. An IQ test administered when she was 15 placed her score at 69, borderline intellectual disability. She dropped out of high school at 16. None of that would matter yet, because in the summer of 1981, Wanda Jean Allen was sharing an apartment with a childhood friend named Dedra Pettis. On June 29th, the 2 got into an argument. Allen drew a gun and shot Pettis dead. She would later claim it was an accident, that she'd been returning fire aimed at her by Pettis's boyfriend. Investigators didn't buy it. Bruising and powder burns on Pettis's body told a different story, a close-range shooting, not a stray round caught in a crossfire. Prosecutors offered Allen a deal: plead guilty to manslaughter, serve 4 years. She took it. She served 2. It was inside that prison that Wanda Jean Allen met the woman she would one day kill. Her name was Gloria Jean Leathers, 29 years old, serving her own sentence for stabbing a woman to death outside a Tulsa nightclub in 1979. When Allen was released, she offered Leathers a place to stay. By 1988, the 2 women were sharing a home in Oklahoma City, locked into a relationship that police already knew was volatile. Officers had been called to their address more than once. On December 1st, 1988, that volatility reached its breaking point. It started, of all places, in a grocery store. An argument over money, witnesses later said, that followed the 2 women home and refused to die down. Leathers called her mother. She wanted out. Ruby Wilson arrived to collect her daughter's things. An officer stood by while Leathers packed the car, a routine civil standby, nothing more. Before Leathers could leave, Allen asked her to stay, to work it out. Leathers said no. As she walked outside, Allen followed. Leathers grabbed a garden rake from the yard and struck her across the face. The officer had already left. Leathers and her mother didn't go home. They drove straight to the village police department to file a report against the woman who'd raised that rake. Wanda Jean Allen followed them there. In the parking lot of the police station itself, Allen approached the car. She would later say she saw Leathers still holding the rake and panicked. She returned to her own vehicle, grabbed a .38 caliber handgun, and as Leathers stepped out to face her, fired a single shot into her abdomen. Ruby Wilson watched her daughter get shot from a few feet away. 2 police officers inside the building heard the gunshot. Neither one saw it happen. By the time anyone reached the parking lot, Wanda Jean Allen had already fled. Gloria Jean Leathers did not die instantly. She lived 4 more days, long enough to tell police from her hospital bed exactly who had shot her. Investigators recovered the .38 caliber handgun they believed was the murder weapon. abandoned near the home the two women had shared. It took 5 days to run Wanda Jean Allen down. She was arrested 70 miles away in Duncan, Oklahoma, on December 6th. 2 hours after her arrest, Gloria Leathers died of her wound. As detectives pieced together the timeline that would carry Wanda Jean Allen from a grocery store argument to the front steps of a police station, and eventually to a lethal injection gurney 12 years later, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our deep dives into the darkest, most complicated corners of true crime history. Now, back to Oklahoma County. The state of Oklahoma charged Allen with first-degree murder and announced it would seek the death penalty. Her family hired an attorney named Robert Carpenter for a fee they could barely afford, $800 up front, on a promise of $4,200 more they never had. When Carpenter learned prosecutors wanted death, not manslaughter, he asked the court to withdraw. He'd never tried a capital case. He had no investigator, no expert witnesses, no funding for either. The judge refused to let him go. At trial in April 1989, Allen claimed self-defense. She testified that she feared Leathers, that Leathers had once bragged to her about the 1979 killing in Tulsa. The judge ruled that testimony inadmissible hearsay. The jury never heard it. What the jury did hear was a birthday card. Prosecutors read aloud a message Allen had written to Leathers months before the shooting. A threat, in her own handwriting, promising to hunt her down if she ever tried to leave. They heard the prosecutor argue that Allen was the dominant partner in the relationship, that she wore the pants. What they heard almost nothing about was the IQ score, the brain injuries, the neurological damage, documented years earlier, because no one had ever tested for it at trial. Carpenter didn't learn any of it until after the verdict. It took the jury less than a day to convict her of first-degree murder. When they learned she'd killed once before, it took them 2 hours to sentence her to death. Wanda Jean Allen would spend the next 12 years on death row. In that time, she became a devoted, born-again Christian, leading worship among fellow inmates, quoting scripture from memory. In October of 2000, Ruby Wilson, the mother of the woman she'd killed, came to see her. The two women prayed together. Wilson forgave her. At her clemency hearing that December, held before a packed room at the Lexington Assessment and Reception Center, Allen addressed the Pardon and Parole Board directly. She asked Gloria Leathers' family for forgiveness. Then she turned to the 5 board members and asked them for the only thing left to ask for. Please let me live. The board voted 3-1 against her. Only its chairperson argued for mercy. It didn't change what came next. On January 11, 2001, after the U.S. Supreme Court and Governor Frank Keating both refused last-minute appeals, Wanda Jean Allen became the first woman executed in Oklahoma since statehood, and the first black woman executed in the United States since 1954. Outside the penitentiary gates, the Reverend Jesse Jackson had been arrested the night before, protesting alongside dozens of others. Her last meal, delivered to her cell that evening, was almost defiantly simple: a single bag of potato chips. Strapped to the gurney, Wanda Jean Allen was asked if she had any final words. "Father, forgive them," she said. "They know not what they do." A pause. Then, "That's it. Thank you." She was pronounced dead at 9:21 p.m. Case 2. Marilyn Plants. 4 months after Wanda Jean Allen's execution, Oklahoma would strap a second woman to that same gurney. Her name was Marilyn K. Plants. And unlike Allen's case, hers wasn't a single desperate moment. It was a plan, rehearsed, revised, and paid for. By 1988, Marilyn and James "Jim" Plants had been married 11 years. To their Midwest city neighbors, they looked like the picture of an ordinary family: a homemaker and Sunday school teacher married to a hard-working pressroom supervisor at the Daily Oklahoman, raising 2 young children, 9-year-old Trina and 6-year-old Christopher. "It's like when you hear people talk about the perfect marriage," Jim's sister would later say, "the kind where nobody ever seemed to fight." Behind that image, Marilyn Plants had begun an affair with an 18-year-old named William Clifford Bryson. What Bryson didn't know, or chose not to see, was that Marilyn had already tried, more than once, to have her husband killed. She'd approached Bryson and a second young man, Clinton McKimball, about it directly. Run Jim off the road, she suggested, or catch him coming home from his night shift and beat him. There was a life insurance policy on Jim Plants, roughly $300,000. Marilyn was the beneficiary. The first attempt fell apart in traffic. They lost his truck on the highway. A gun she'd given Bryson to finish the job got pawned instead. Then came a night that should have ended it. Bryson, McKimball, and a third man named Roderick Ferris gathered at the Plants' house, ate hamburgers, listened to music, and waited by the door, a hammer in one man's hand, a knife in another's, for Jim to walk in. When someone finally knocked, it wasn't Jim at all. Hours later, Ferris was arrested on an unrelated charge, and that attempt died with him in a jail cell. Time and again, the plan collapsed. Marilyn Plants kept rebuilding it. On the night of August 25th into the 26th, 1988, it finally held. Bryson and McKimball came to the house that evening and settled into the living room with beer and cocaine. Around 10:30, Marilyn went to bed. Her children were already asleep down the hall. The two men drank and got high until nearly midnight, when they drifted off completely, dead asleep in the house of the man they'd come to kill, until the sound of a key turning in the front door jolted them both awake. Jim Plants walked in from his shift, whistling, a bag of groceries in his arms. Bryson struck first, his own son's baseball bat swinging out of the dark. Jim cried out his wife's name. He called for her again as McKimball joined in. He would not stay down, witnesses later said, no matter how many times they hit him. Finally, he did. Marilyn Plants came out of the bedroom. She looked at her husband, beaten and bleeding on the floor of their home, his skull visibly fractured, and she told the two men it wasn't going to look like an accident. Burn him, she said. They carried Jim Plants, still alive, out to his own pickup truck. Bryson drove him to a deserted stretch of road on the far side of the county, the same route he'd have taken to work that morning. McKimball followed behind in Marilyn's car. They propped his body behind the steering wheel. A rag stuffed into the gas tank failed to catch. So Bryson doused him and the cab directly with gasoline and lit a match. As they drove away, they looked back. Jim Plants was rising up inside the burning truck. Medical examiners would later confirm what that meant. Soot deep in his lungs. He had still been breathing when the fire took hold. Back at the house, Marilyn Plants spent the rest of the night trying to scrub her husband's blood out of the living room carpet. Investigators wouldn't take long to unravel what really happened that night. But before we get to how they did it, take a second to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so our next deep dive lands right in your feed. Because what detectives found next would blow this tragic accident story apart completely. James Plants's charred body was found just after 5 that morning, slumped behind the wheel of his burned-out truck, one leg hanging out the open door. Dental records confirmed the identity. The autopsy told the rest. Blunt force trauma to the skull, layered with thermal injury. Someone had beaten this man before the fire ever started. It took investigators 4 days to arrest his widow. On August 29th, police took Marilyn Plants into custody on a murder charge. They believed, correctly, that she had paid someone to kill her husband. The next day, they picked up William Bryson and Clinton McKimball. By Wednesday, all three faced first-degree murder charges, and prosecutors announced they'd seek death for 2 of them. McKimball broke first. In exchange for a life sentence, instead of a death sentence, he agreed to testify against the other 2, laying out the plot in devastating detail. The failed attempts, the baseball bats pulled from the children's own bedroom, the 4 words that sealed Jim Plants's fate. "She told us to burn him," he testified. In a taped confession played for the jury, Bryson admitted he'd had no real reason to kill Jim Plants at all. He simply couldn't stop thinking about the black eyes and the tears Marilyn had shown him again and again throughout their affair. Marilyn Plants denied everything. She told police she and Jim had the perfect marriage. She said she didn't even know about the insurance policy. The jury did not believe her. At trial in March 1989, prosecutors laid out the timeline for Marilyn and Bryson, tried jointly before the same jury. Neither defendant testified. They didn't need to. McKimball's testimony, corroborated by witnesses who'd overheard Bryson and Marilyn discussing the plot in a grocery store parking lot weeks before the murder, was damning enough on its own. The defense had little to offer beyond disputing the physical evidence that would later become its own controversy when the forensic chemist involved in the case, Joyce Gilchrist, came under federal investigation for flawed testimony across dozens of other convictions. It wasn't enough to save either defendant. Jurors took less than 3 hours to find Marilyn Plants guilty of first-degree murder, arson, solicitation, and conspiracy. The next day, after 5 hours of deliberation, they sentenced both Marilyn Plants and William Bryson to death. William Bryson was executed by lethal injection on June 15, 2000. Marilyn Plants had 11 more months to live. On death row, Plants reconciled with her daughter, Trina, by then 21, after 13 years without contact. Trina begged the Pardon and Parole Board to spare her mother's life. "My father's gone," she said, "and we need a mom." It wasn't enough. The board denied clemency. Governor Keating refused to intervene. On May 1, 2001, Marilyn Plants was led into the same death chamber that had taken Wanda Jean Allen 4 months earlier. Her final meal, delivered the night before, was a small feast: a chicken taco salad, a Mexican pizza, 2 soft chicken tacos, 2 enchiritos, an order of cinnamon twists, a slice of pecan pie, and 2 cans of Coca-Cola. Strapped to the gurney, she thanked her family, her attorneys, and the small group of witnesses who had come to see her die. "I want to tell all of my family that I love them very much," she said, and named her 2 children, Trina and Chris, one final time. She was pronounced dead at 9:11 p.m., the second woman executed in Oklahoma's history, both of them within the same calendar year. Case 3. Lois Nadine Smith. By December of 2001, Oklahoma had 1 woman left on its death row. Her name was Lois Nadine Smith. In high school, decades earlier, they'd called her Mean Nadine. By the time the state was finished with her, that nickname would follow her all the way to the execution chamber. Smith's crime predated both of the women who came before her. It happened in 1982, 19 years before her execution, the longest stretch of any of the 3 women between crime and punishment. Her victim was 21 years old. Her name was Cindy Bailey, and she had once dated Smith's son, Greg. By the summer of 1982, that relationship was long over, but the fallout wasn't. Word had reached Lois Nadine Smith that Bailey had been telling people she'd arranged to have Greg killed, and that she was talking to police about Greg's involvement with drugs. True or not, Smith believed it. On the morning of July 4, 1982, she decided to settle it herself. Smith, her son Greg, and a woman named Teresa Baker drove to a motel in Tahlequah and picked up Cindy Bailey. As they pulled away, Smith turned around in her seat and confronted her directly with the rumors. Bailey denied all of it. Lois Nadine Smith didn't believe her. Right there, in the moving car, Smith grabbed Bailey and began to choke her. Then she found a knife inside the victim's own purse and stabbed her in the throat. Somehow, Cindy Bailey was still alive when the car reached its destination, the Gans, Oklahoma home of Smith's ex-husband, Jim. Inside, Smith forced the wounded young woman into a recliner chair. What followed wasn't quick. Smith taunted her with a pistol, pointing it at her head, then her stomach. She fired a single shot into the chair, inches from Bailey's skull, before the wounded woman even had time to process what was happening. Then she opened fire for real. Bailey collapsed to the floor, As Smith's son reloaded the emptied pistol and handed it back to his mother, witnesses said Lois Nadine Smith laughed and jumped again and again on the dying woman's throat. Then she raised the gun a final time and fired 4 more rounds into Cindy Bailey's chest. The autopsy would later count 9 separate gunshot wounds. 5 of them alone would have been fatal. So would the stab wound to her throat. From the moment that car door closed behind her, Cindy Bailey never had a chance. Smith directed her son and Teresa Baker to help dispose of evidence and align their stories. It wouldn't save any of them. Investigators moved fast. Within days, Lois Nadine Smith, her son Greg, and Teresa Baker were all in custody, and prosecutors had more than enough physical evidence to make their case, including a blouse Smith had worn that morning. Spattered with blood, investigators said proved she'd been standing directly beside Bailey when the shots were fired. Smith was charged with first-degree murder. So was her son. Both Lois Nadine Smith and Greg Smith hired the same attorney to represent them, a decision that would haunt her case for the next 2 decades of appeals. On the stand, Smith changed her story from what she'd first told police, now claiming that Teresa Baker, not she, had fired the fatal shots, driven by jealousy over Greg. It contradicted nearly every other witness inside that house. It contradicted the blood on her own blouse. The prosecution's case took less time to present than the defense's version took to unravel. Witnesses inside that house, including Smith's own ex-husband and his wife, testified that it was Lois, not Teresa Baker, who controlled every second of what happened to Cindy Bailey, from the moment they walked through the door to the moment her body hit the floor. Witnesses recalled Smith telling the terrified young woman again and again exactly how this was going to end for her, and that it wasn't going to be quick. The jury retreated to deliberate Lois Nadine Smith's fate. And before we find out what they decided, take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you're notified the next time we uncover a case this disturbing. Now, back to the verdict that would define the rest of her life. The jury didn't take long. They convicted Lois Nadine Smith of first-degree murder. In the sentencing phase, they found not 1, but 2 aggravating factors: that the killing had been especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and that Smith had knowingly put more than 1 life at risk that day, holding her ex-husband at gunpoint inside his own home. On December 29, 1982, Lois Nadine Smith was sentenced to death. Her son Greg, convicted separately 6 months later for the same murder, despite reloading the gun mid-massacre, received a sentence of life in prison. Smith spent 19 years fighting that sentence. Her attorneys argued that years of physical abuse at the hands of an alcoholic husband, combined with alcohol and days of lost sleep, had clouded her judgment that July morning, mitigating evidence the original jury never fully heard. Her appeals also argued that sharing an attorney with her own son had crippled her defense from the very beginning, that he was never free to argue the one theory that might have saved her, that Greg, not she, had driven the killing. She challenged the state's blood spatter expert too, the man whose testimony tied that spattered blouse directly to her as the shooter, and years later, courts would concede he'd overstated his own qualifications, even as they ruled the error harmless. Federal courts rejected nearly every argument, again and again. In November 2001, the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board considered clemency one final time. The vote was close, 3-2 against. It still wasn't enough. On December 4, 2001, at the age of 61, Lois Nadine Smith was executed by lethal injection, the 3rd woman put to death in Oklahoma that year. No state had executed that many women in a single year since the death penalty was reinstated a quarter century earlier, and the number was enough to push Oklahoma's total past Texas's for the most executions of any state in the country that year. Her last meal was barbecue ribs, onion rings, a slice of strawberry banana cake, and a cherry limeade. Strapped to the gurney, she turned her final words toward the family she'd shattered 19 years earlier. "I'm sorry for the pain and loss I've caused you," she said, before asking them one last time to forgive her. Cindy Balley's daughter, Brandy Fields, watched from behind the glass. She had grown up without a mother because of what happened inside that house in Gons. "I'm glad it's over," she said afterward. "It's been a long time." Lois Nadine Smith was pronounced dead at 9:13 p.m. 3 women, 3 separate crimes, born of 3 very different kinds of desperation. A violent relationship that ended in a single gunshot outside a police station. A cold, calculated insurance scheme that took months to plan and still nearly fell apart before it worked. And a mother's rage turned lethal against a young woman who never made it out of a house in Gans alive. 3 verdicts, 3 clemency hearings, each one denied. And in the end, the same gurney, in the same room, inside the walls of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, a room that had waited 98 years to hold a woman and then held 3 of them in less than 12 months. Gender didn't save them, neither did remorse, nor faith, nor the forgiveness some of the victims' own families were willing to offer. In Oklahoma, in 2001, none of it was enough to stop the drugs from moving through the IV line. Of these 3 cases, Wanda Jean Allen, Marilyn Plants, and Lois Nadine Smith, which one shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and tell us which of these cases you think deserves its own full deep dive. We'll see you in the next one.